Jeremy McMillan from Grayson College serving as the Vice Chair. Please be advised that this meeting is being broadcast over the internet and recorded, so I would ask that all attendees silence your cell phones. For those attending via teleconference, please mute your phone until you're ready to speak. This prevents background noise. Thank you. Now I'd like to ask Roland to call roll.
Mr. Maldonado, are you online?
Hi, it's Warren Hurd. I'm standing in for the Chancellor today.
Dr. Miller?
Here.
Mr. Lee?
Here.
Mr. Cervantes?
Here.
Ms. Wickland?
Here.
Mr. Yiannopoulos? Are you online? Mr. Reeser?
Here.
Dr. Raza?
Here.
Dr. Anglin, are you online?
I am on the line.
Dr. Clinton?
Here.
Mr. McMillan's here.
Yes,
Dr. Rhodes?
A quorum is present. As a reminder, members on the call, you are permitted to vote. So on our agenda, agenda item 2 is consideration and approval of the minutes from the September 21st, 2017 meeting. The minutes are included in your materials. Do any of the members have comments, questions, or corrections? Not, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes. Van moved. Second? Ron seconds. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? All right. Agenda item 3 is discussion, review, and consideration of the Commissioners' 2020-2021 biennium charges. The charge 1 is to study and make recommendations for the appropriate funding levels for the core, contact hour, and student success funding. There are no recommendations at this time. Ms. Wickland, do you have any further updates from the work group?
We are
Go ahead.
We are just continuing to study the information that has been given us, and we're looking at different funding models from the critical fields to fields of study, and looking at how things could be allocated.
Okay. Staff provided background information on field of study for the meeting, and so you have that in your packet. We do have Gary Tomerlin from Academic Quality and Workforce who will provide updates on field of study and will be available for questions. So, Dr. Tomerlin.
Okay. Well, you have the information in your packet, and the goal is to complete 25 fields of study between this time and the beginning of session in 2019. The list in your packet, in your materials, is the top 25 graduate transfer disciplines. At the July board meeting, the board approved architecture, music, nursing, and 4 of the engineering concentrations. At the board meeting week after next, the rules to establish the next 6 disciplines are on the agenda, and then nominations for 5 more committees are on the agenda, and those are psychology, business, accounting, kinesiology, and dance, I believe it is. Dance is not so much a big transfer area, but there's lots of conversation from the field about getting an alignment there. And so what we're doing is we're taking administrative rules for each of the disciplines. We're taking about 5 or 6 of those to each board meeting, and then immediately after each board meeting, we're sending out nominations for the next group, and that will carry us until the end of the year. So as soon as the board, assuming they approve the nominees for the list I gave you or I talked about, We will start trying to convene meetings, and the goal is just to keep the work we've already started doing, but accelerate the process. And we have a staff member effective this week that their job is 100% field of study. And so we're just going to try to just make this as big a priority as we can for planning purposes. When I was talking to that person this week, I told them that we probably need to be penciling in 75 meetings for the next year as we start looking at all the disciplines and stuff. So it's going to be a lot of work on our side, but that's what we're working on. That's where we're going. And I guess, if you have any questions, let me know.
Does anyone have any questions? So there, in the work group, there was a question about the obligation of the universities to accept field of study and if there are any differences by region. And so do you have any information or knowledge of that?
Well, there's nothing in the statute that is regional. They're statewide. And it's Texas Education Code 61.823. And there's basically two paragraphs. Paragraph B, and I'm paraphrasing since I'm not looking at it, as you can obviously tell, more or less says that if a student completes the field of study, the block of courses transfers and applies. And then paragraph C says that if the student completes part of the courses, then they get credit course by course. And so the advantage of field of study is that it transfers and applies. Might point out that during this past session, one of Senator West's bills that addressed transferability, and I forget which bill number it was, it had a section in it that said that if there's a board-approved field of study and a community college offers a program in that area, that the college would have to adopt the field of study. And so, obviously, the legislature has a level of awareness of field of study, and it's a priority. The 25 number was in the bill, that we would complete 25 of them between now and session. But since the bill didn't pass, it's not a requirement, but we're still taking that language and we're trying to run with it.
So you mentioned the staff member 75 meetings and end of the year. And so how often will these be refreshed? And is that a permanent funding for we don't have permanent funding in higher education, but is that envisioned as an ongoing activity of the organization for the long term?
And I actually met with my group this morning, or many of my group that are involved in fields of study, and we were talking about really and truly trying to help the person transition into the field of study position, and all the people that have worked on the field of study, the various disciplines that we've completed thus far, of trying to find a way to standardize all of this stuff, to scale this stuff, and make sure that we're doing it the same for all disciplines. But in the meeting this morning, one of the conversations was, as soon as we finish the 25, what's the next 25? And then almost immediately, as soon as you finish that conversation, then the conversation circles back around, Jeremy, to how do we update these and revise them and keep them current and relevant? And, many of y'all know that the initial fields of study were developed around 2000, 2001, sometime in that ballpark, and they haven't been updated in the interim. And so now we're trying to update all of those, and we're trying to create new ones. And then during the 84th session, the statute, the field of study statute, a new section was added that said we have to look at them periodically. And so keeping them current and relevant is an important task that we need to keep working on. And I hope that over time, that as the groups come together, we have a opportunity to level the playing field more and more over time. Getting consensus of the groups initially is somewhat taskful, depending on the groups. And then hopefully as we go through iterations of like, okay, we got this much, what if we add one more course? What if we add this? And I think it's just an alignment conversation, and we'll have to see where it goes over time.
Any other questions of the group? I have a curiosity. Is there any discussion happening in the general academics around field of study and funding at all?
I'm not sure exactly. What do you?
We're being asked to consider field of study funding for community colleges. So is there any dialogue around some incentives for the general academics?
That would be more of a David Young and
Okay.
that.
The general academics currently don't have outcomes-based funding. It's been proposed as a graduation bonus, and there are really only two metrics there. One is number of degrees awarded and degrees awarded to at-risk students. So currently there's no, there hadn't been any discussions about adding that type of bonus for the general academics.
And, you know, if I could, even if there is some kind of funding for the general academics at some time in the future, yes or no, as I discussed statute, I mean, they have to transfer and apply the courses. And it's really, you know, I think we all know courses transfer. I've seen that written many times about it'll transfer as a lower level academic course. And those are kind of like unicorns. They're kind of hard to find with the downward pressure on degree hours of finding a place where those lower level courses apply. And so the fields of study, the courses transfer and apply, and they fill squares. And as much as anything else, in engineering as an example, if students don't start taking engineering courses literally their first semester, they're not in sequence. And so if they completed the entire core curriculum at one of your colleges and they hadn't taken any engineering courses and they transfer to a university and get admitted into an engineering program, they're probably going to be able to take one course the first semester, Intro to Engineering. And then they're going to have to sequence for perhaps as much as 2 years to get all of their foundational engineering stuff before they can then be ready to sequence as a junior. As part of working on the architecture field of study, we created 2 new studio courses for the second year studio experience for the students to try to get them on par so that when they transfer, they're as close to junior status as possible. And that's one of the advantages of field of study. It's like I said, it's not just transfer and apply, but it's almost like transfer, apply, and alignment because the sequencing, as we know, in some disciplines is so important.
Great. Do you have any further discussion or questions on that topic? All right, so we're going to move on to the next charge, Charge 6. Review existing coordinating board data on dual credit program funding, including preliminary data available from the 17-18 dual credit study being conducted and contracted by research organizations, and share insight on current dual credit funding mechanisms. So as far as work group updates, I'm the chair of that work group, subgroup. We did meet this morning and are very interested in seeing and hearing the data from the REN study, but also having some additional things that come out so we can make some considerations. I don't think we're ready to make any recommendations at this point. So with that, I want to have Dr. Holly Koshevich. Did I do well?
No, you did pretty well. It's you can say it Koshevich or Koshevich, whichever.
Koshevich, is that the correct pronunciation? I'll do that. Dr. Koshevich will present additional information as it relates to the RAND report, and we appreciate you being here and sharing that information with us today.
Yeah, thank you for giving me the opportunity to share more about the study. So first I want to thank Julie and her team for giving me the opportunity to actually present to you. You know, the research, sorry, I'm not familiar with these microphones, but hello? Okay, great. We really believe in engaging with stakeholders like you to ensure that the research that we're doing actually can provide rational decision-making and has the potential to benefit students. And second, I just want to emphasize what my role is on the project. So I'm not leading the design of the research studies, but my role is really to translate the research into policy recommendations that come out of the coordinating board, to also gather and incorporate feedback from the coordinating board and external stakeholders like you, and to ensure that the study effectively meets the research needs of the coordinating board and other state policymakers. So that said, I'm not going to be able to answer any specific questions about the study components. I can answer general questions, but if you do have specific questions, I can forward them to the research team members that are most appropriate, and I can report back to you with answers. So before I provide a overview of the study, I just wanted to tell you more about the motivation that's driving it. So the coordinating board and RAND have both found that there's been an increase in student participation in dual credit over the years. The coordinating board did some internal analysis and found that the number of students participating in dual credit has increased by 650% from 2000 to 2015. So back in 2000, there was roughly around 11,000 students taking a dual credit course, and today there's over 150,000 students. So that's quite a big increase. And RAND found that the number of dual credit semester credit hours has increased, being delivered by principally community colleges, but also by four-year institutions. So back in 2000, roughly 125,000 dual credit semester credit hours were being delivered. Now it's up to 1,300,000. So again, a really large increase. So at the same time, we're seeing kind of this increasing trend in participation. We're also seeing the legislation pass policies that essentially relax rules and regulations around dual credit policies. So in 2015, the legislature passed HB 505, which essentially prohibited the state from limiting dual credit courses to just juniors and seniors. So now 9th graders and 10th graders can take dual credit, and they can take as many dual credit semester credit hours as they want to. So they can take up to 60 hours during an associate's degree. In the same legislative session, the legislature repealed Texas Code 130.08, which prohibited any community college or any four-year institution from delivering dual credit outside their local service area. That is no longer the case. So let's say a community college in Lubbock can deliver a dual credit course to a high school student in El Paso. And so with the increase in student participation, the relaxation of rules around dual credit, there's been a lot of questions about the efficacy and efficiency of dual credit programs. So if you've been tuning in to any of the committee hearings at the Capitol, you've been hearing questions like, is dual credit really boosting student achievement? Are students saving money from participating in dual credit? And is instruction really in dual credit courses? Are they comparable to the instruction at a college level course delivered at a community college, for example? So this is a really important topic, and we know that dual credit is going to be a topic in the next legislative session. And so in the interest of, informing legislation with objective research and engaging with different stakeholders, the coordinating board partnered with two research organizations, RAND for phase 1, and that phase 1 has actually been completed, and it actually was completed in August 2017. And the coordinating board partnered with American Institutes for Research for phase 2, which is kind of like a deeper dive into dual credit education programs. And so ultimately, the goals of this research is twofold. So the first goal is really to establish baseline information on dual credit programs. There's not a lot of information out there in the first place. So we kind of want to take stock of the current quality and efficiency of dual credit programs in Texas, and also really take stock of the challenges and opportunities that community colleges and four-year institutions face when delivering this kind of credit-based transition program. We also want to see how the state can reform dual credit in areas to boost student achievement and improve the stewardship of public resources. So the College for All Texans Foundation is funding the project with generous support from Community Foundations of Texas, Greater Texas Foundation, the Meadows Foundation, and Houston Endowment. So as I said before, the interim report has been released. This presents findings from phase 1. And you can actually access that report on our website. I've heard from Roland that many of you have already read the report, but in case you wanted to actually print it out, it's on our website. And also, the final draft will come out in December of 2018, but we're actually going to disseminate a final draft for public comment in July of 2018. So this is just for your information. When you read the report, this is your opportunity to provide feedback and help us contextualize those results. So I know, like I said, I know many of you have read the interim report, but many of you have not. So I think it's important for me to just provide a broad, high-level summary of what we found from phase 1. So the first major finding was that dual credit students really outperformed non-dual credit students on a wide range of outcomes. So that those outcomes are college enrollment, persistence, graduation. And so this suggests to us, to a certain extent, that dual credit students are doing well, right? But we also found that there were racial disparities in student participation in dual credit programs, and that dual credit students really didn't represent kind of the general high school population that attend public high schools. And if we just look at the most recent data, we see that white students are still the predominant group taking dual credit courses. We also found that delivery of dual credit courses and services varied widely across community colleges. So we found, after doing some qualitative research, we found that, some community colleges deliver dual credit courses on a high school campus. Some of them deliver on a college campus. I mean, you're all very familiar with this. But some of them, employed a high school teacher. Others employed a college, faculty member. And then others use really robust student services, while others do not. So we see there's a lot of variation in the way dual credit is being delivered across the state. And finally, we also found that dual credit students, in comparison to non-dual credit students, took roughly the same amount of semester credit hours to complete a four-year degree, but they completed that degree in a short amount of time, so by roughly 3 months, more or less. So they're taking the same amount of semester credit hours, but doing so in a short amount of time. Okay, sorry. So, does that say 4 to 6? Okay, sorry about that. Okay. So, what are we doing in phase 2? That phase 2 started roughly a month and a half ago. And like I said, it's a draft report of what we find will be released in July of 2018. But phase 2 really answers the questions that couldn't be answered in phase 1. And so if you just follow the slides, I list the research questions that we're answering. So the first research question really tries to get at, are dual credit programs in and of themselves really improving student success? We saw from phase 1 that dual credit students outperform non-dual credit students, but it's unclear whether it's the dual credit programs that's really boosting success, or is it really the fact that maybe dual credit students are better academically prepared, or they really have a desire to excel in school. And so we're going to do a causal impact analysis that really helps us isolate that impact of dual credit programs. And we're going to be using TA and coordinating board data to get at that average impact, but we are also going to see if there's differential impacts across different kinds of students and across different kinds of models, like online dual credit programs, on campus versus off campus. It all depends on the quality of the data. And so that's question number one. And also, I just wanted to point out that most of the causal impact analysis will be able to speak to dual credit programs before HB 505 because we haven't had a long enough window past HB 505 to really document kind of changes in student success based on their participation in dual credit. The second question we're trying to answer is, why are we still continuing to see racial disparities and other disparities in dual credit participation? So we are going to use coordinating board data and TA data to really find out whether it's, different preparation levels of high school students, whether they have differential access to dual credit participation, whether they have differential access and participation to other forms of college prep courses like AP or IB. We also think that maybe advising practices might contribute to those disparities. So through qualitative research, we're going to be talking to advisors and trying to get at whether some students are being encouraged to take dual credit versus others will not. The third question really gets at kind of differences in instruction between dual credit courses and college credit only courses. So like I said, in phase one, we found that there's, instructors who teach dual credit are different from instructors who teach college credit only courses. And so we're going to take a closer look at, if there are systematic differences in curriculum, content, assessment methods, and standards, teaching practices between dual credit instructors and college level only instructors. And the fourth question really gets at advising. I've kind of spoken to you a little bit about this, but thanks, Jen. So, a really big topic these days is, that some dual credit students might be taking courses they don't need to take, and that just adds to their overall college trajectory. And so we're going to be talking to high school guidance counselors and college advisors to really kind of understand how we can ensure that students who take dual credit courses are taking the right sorts of courses, and that high school students have equitable access to those courses and services. And I think the fifth kind of question is of the most interest to you, so I'm going to dig a little bit deeper into that question. So we're going to be leading a study to assess the costs of delivering dual credit in the state and how those costs are borne across different stakeholders, and to the extent that we can, how these costs compare to the benefits of dual credit education. And Dr. Jesse Levin from American Institutes of Research is going to be doing this analysis, and he's going to be assessing the costs of different approaches to deliver dual credit, such as early college high school versus online, and where possible, he's going to be comparing the costs of dual credit education to actual benefits that we are going to estimate from our causal impact study. And just a little bit more about who he is. He's the lead cost analyst at American Institutes for Research. He's a principal researcher there. And I have a whole list of projects he's involved with, but I'll limit it to a few. So he's on a number of projects investigating educational production, school finance and adequacy, and resource allocation. And he also serves as the project director of a national study of weighted student funding systems, a feasibility study to improve the quality of school-level expenditure data, and deputy director for a study of Title I resource allocation, all for the U.S. Department of Education. So he's very well-versed in school finance and doing cost-benefit analyses. And the final question we're going to be answering is, we're really interested in looking at the impact of HB 505 on student participation and outcomes. So now that 9th and 10th grade students are taking dual credit, are these students still excelling in college like they did, and like 11th and 12th graders did in the past? So we intend to pay close attention to the academic preparation levels of dual credit students, as well as the amount of semester credit hours they're taking towards their degree. So that's a broad overview of the study, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Okay, does anybody have questions?
Yeah.
Thanks, Jeremy. When you study the costs, is it your intention to try to make any differentiation between dual credit that may be classroom-based, like conventional gen ed classes, versus technical CTE stuff? Do you?
We are going to be conducting interviews with institutions that do deliver CTE, but based on the evidence that we've been able to produce, CTE only accounts for, I would say, less than 10% of all dual credit courses.
I agree.
So we are going to look at that to the extent that we can, but since academic dual credit is kind of the bulk of kind of dual credit courses that are being delivered, that's going to be our focus.
So if I could offer you the, let's call it observations from my perspective is, I agree it's a small part of dual credit today.
Yeah.
But I suggest it will be growing sector in the future. There's big distinctions between CTE and classroom-based dual credit in the initial capital expenditures to set up for those classes.
Okay.
Sometimes in the faculty credentialing is, although may from a SAC standpoint seem lower, they're troublesome to find.
When you say troublesome to find, what do you mean by that?
What I mean is people who actually have the defendable credentials to teach a college-level course in a technical field.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, and you can't. They cost a lot of money.
Okay.
So my point is I suggest our history is light because we're still operating under the shadow of pre-HB5. Now that HB5 is out there, I suggest that CTE will be, I will tell you, if the number of times my phone rings every day is any indication, it will be a growing part of it in the future. So I just wanted to offer that outlook.
No, I appreciate
and suggest that if you dismiss it as a tiny part, you may miss an opportunity to prepare us all for what could be a growing part of the field.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you.
This is Jim Yiannopoulos at Central Texas College. I'm sorry I came in late. I had to take a call. Who presented just now? I missed your name.
My name is Holly Koshevich.
Holly?
Yes.
And how do you spell your last name?
There you go.
Do you, I should probably just send you an email.
Yeah, please do. Well, I'd like to reach out to you.
Yeah, sure. I can spell it out for you.
Well, I listened to a lot of things that you mentioned, and we aren't. I can tell you here what we're doing with our school districts is not what you described. It actually we're doing the opposite. We don't call it dual credit. We call it dual enrollment because we can only give credit for college. So I think that's a misnomer. But and we insist that they all have they're all credentialed, they're all vetted through us, all the faculty members, and we're not doing them in the classrooms with the high school kids taking high school. So there's no double dipping going on there with any of our school districts and what we're doing. And also, ours are a lottery. We don't handpick, and neither does the school. And what we found is that 60% of the kids that are coming to our dual enrolled courses and programs, to include early college, high school, are representative of the 44,000 students in this one school district here in Killeen. And that's that they are free lunch and free breakfast programs, and they're outperforming all the rest of the students in the high schools in this area. So I don't know if we have a different model that we're using. I think that to paint us all with the same brush might be a disservice to us. So
I think you definitely raise a fair point. Like I said, I think there's many models of dual credit education in the state, but we have looked at all those models, from the state level, you're probably right. There are, certain like early college high schools where you look at this new population and it does mirror the high school population in the state. That certainly can be the case. But when you look at the state as a whole, it does not mirror the state population, high school population. So I think it's just
my fear
the
is
unit
that-
of analysis is a little bit different.
Yeah, I know, but my fear is that the government being the state, takes the approach that well, if that's the case, then we kill the program. It's sort of like you burn down the barn to get to a few rats. I'm not sure that that's what any of us want. And the other thing, I think, and I don't know who, I may be talking out of school now, I really believe that we should be measured. The community colleges should be measured differently than the 4 years. We are all measured by that same brush. Well, that our missions and our everything about us is different. We were set up differently than the 4-year institutions, and so it goes from everything that we are charged to do, which is provide affordable, quality education, which we've done, and now it seems like we are on the defensive trying to defend that. I'm not sure that that's a legitimate argument that we should be involved in. I mean, we've done what we were supposed to do, and we're continuing to do that, I think, as a whole, as community colleges, yet there's no parameters that measure us differently than the 4 years, It's all about completion rates. It's about if I could cut everybody off on a ACT score or an SAT score and you don't get in unless you bet, well, I could have some completion rates also. But I have to take everybody, and
It almost begs the question, if it is the most like Texas, then we need to be doing as much as we can in that space and much more in other spaces of higher education to meet the growing demands of tomorrow for Texas.
So when you say Texas, do you mean the overall population of Texas? Okay.
yeah, how do we get around? I just went through 1, 2, 3. I think there were 5 or 6 sessions of 30 by 60 the coordinating board presented to my faculty and staff here about a week ago. And, the question kept coming up, and I asked it too, but it came from the faculty. Where is the rigor in the 30 by 60? In other words, where is the competency? 30 by 60 is a great goal, and it's attainable, but if it's based upon those completion rates, and that's what it's measured on, we're going to get back to what we've done in the high schools. When the high schools weren't producing graduates, the charge was stepped up that, hey, you'll start producing graduates. So they did. But to the demise of what those graduates could do. And so, unfortunately, I hate to tell you, but my biggest department is developmental studies. Why? Because the high schools are doing what they're doing. They're pushing people out with diplomas that they can't read, write, add, or subtract. So guess where they come? They come here. Why? University of Texas won't take them. A&M won't take them. Rice won't take them. So they come to us at the community college, and we have to take them. So the question was, where is the competency within that scenario? And I'm not sure there was one. It's just, this is a goal, and we can meet it. Sure, we can pump out diplomas, and we can pump out all these things. There's the assumption that when you do that, they will be of college rigor and they will have certain standards. But I'm not so sure that you can guarantee that. And I'll be quiet again.
So, Mike, you brought up fund or CTE, and we're seeing more requests for that. And so, as you look to the level of preparedness of students coming to us, I've guessed the level of preparedness is a little different in your CTE programs, and the outcomes themselves may be a little different as well.
Yes.
And so that just urge you to ponder that as a part of what you measure in terms of success on that front. Mm-hmm. Anyone else have questions, comments? Quiet?
Yeah.
I had 2 more, but I can't remember what they are.
Well, you can, if any of you have questions about the study, you can feel free to email me, and I'll be happy to answer them.
Okay. Well, I do think that as we look to the funding and if there is a goal to expand dual credit to meet 60 by 30 Texas, that some of the things that you're investigating, I think if you look at the true cost of some of the dual credit, that we may find it costs more than we currently receive, and that expanding that creates some challenges for us. And so right now, since the results are not going to be released until June of next year and then December, I'm not sure that we'll be able to garner a lot of actionable things for our work group for recommendations from the Formula Advisory Committee, but we do appreciate that the study is going on and that you're sharing that information. So, okay. Charge 3 is to study and make recommendations on the treatment of competency-based courses and formula allocations. Mr. Yiannopoulos, who's joining us by phone, do you have any updates for the work group?
I'm sorry, I got interrupted.
Okay. We're on the charge on CBE, and so
okay.
Has your work group, do you have any updates or recommendations?
No, I don't. At this point, I've sent out, I think, 2 emails to the work group. My plan was to get back together. I just got back in town last night, and I had some issues here today. I'm leaving again Sunday, headed out of town again. So when I get back, we will gather together. We have some ideas here. We've done CBE. We started a high school program back in the 70s, and we were one of 2 institutions that did that. The other one was Wyndham School System, which was a school system for the Texas Department of Corrections, and we along with them were given the ability to develop an adult competency-based high school program. So we've been doing competency-based programs, and we've moved it over to the college and some of our courses, and we think we have a model that works in a way to fund it, but we'll be getting some specifics to the work group to consider on how that could be done. But I don't have it now.
Great. Well, thanks for that, and appreciate the work group activity. Staff did provide some information regarding CBE and the materials for the meeting, so
yes.
I'll refer to that. And then we also will hear from Dr. Jennifer Nalos, who'll provide additional information on CBE and will be available for questions. So.
Okay.
Thank you all for having me here today. I'm based in the Academic Quality and Workforce Division, and some of my responsibilities include communicating with the Competency-Based Education Network, which is a national organization of different institutions and stakeholders that are sort of establishing some industry norms at a organizational level, as well as working with institutions here in Texas that are interested in developing CBE programs and starting to gather more of the pulse of what's happening. Because even from comments already today, we hear that there's institutions that have or already are developing or already have implemented competency-based education programs in different manners, from courses all the way up to full degree programs. But it's becoming a more popular topic in conversations and dialogue, and particularly of interest with how could this be considered for funding, or should it be considered for funding, and a lot of those other questions along the way. So
right.
I was invited here just to share just a brief overview, and then entertain any questions I can answer or points of interest I can investigate for your next meeting. One of the initiatives that's supported by the coordinating board is the Texas Affordable Baccalaureate, and a lot of dialogue around competency-based education has been being linked with the Affordable Baccalaureate, but I just wanted to share that these are not interchangeable terms. The Affordable Baccalaureate is a program that challenges institutions to offer a degree for $15,000 or less. Now, many of those institutions have found that competency-based education is a mechanism to do this, but not all institutions are using CBE, and then not all CBE programs are Texas Affordable Baccalaureate programs. And so as we move forward in understanding what our landscape looks like in Texas, this is sort of my stump speech. They're different, they can interact with each other, but just sort of knowing our acronyms, especially since I work with both projects, I find maybe it's my fault because it's my name attached to them. I believe you
At some point, could you send me an email so I can get in contact with you? This is Jim.
Yeah, certainly. I know that my contact information is in all the meeting packet information as well.
Okay.
But I wrote your name down so I can send you an email. So you should be familiar with this definition. This is what Dr. Uckland brought to the meeting the last time, how we're starting to understand CBE across the institutions in the state. Most sources you can look for different definitions. They'll have some nuance and variation, and they're largely derived from the different elements of looking at that. CBE is just a framework for understanding instructional and delivery mode of the content, assuring that a student has developed knowledge, skill, and abilities at a determined mastery level before awarding them a grade or credential. So it's just a different way of thinking about instruction and assessment in course design or program design. There's a lot of variation nationally and within the state for what CBE programs can look like. For example, Western Governors University, it's a 6-month terms, and it's aligned where the students complete a program with modules or components within it. Schools in Texas are largely aligning still with the academic term or the course, and so students will enroll in a more traditional semester or specific set academic terms and do coursework that's often mapped back to the semester credit hour. And then there's all sorts of variation in between at the national level.
What has been the outcome on the Western Governors' latest debacle with the, I guess, was it Title IV in Department of Education?
Oh, are you talking about the Inspector General's letter?
Is that where it came out? Whether they were asking them for $700 and some million back in tuition?
Sure. I can share a little bit of notes that I have.
Okay.
Do you want me to do that now? Or?
Yeah, no, not now.
Okay.
You could send me
I can speak on that at the end, certainly.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So what we're starting to see through the competency-based education network, and then also through conversations here at the coordinating board with institutions and different stakeholders, is that the categories of enrollment period are starting to define what's happening at the institution, compliance with regulations, reporting requirements, and different federal or financial aid issues are popping up related to the enrollment period. And I think that this might be the point of most interest for this group, is that the enrollment period and how a student can select a course or add more courses or how quickly they can complete a course is still heavily tied to how then financial aid is distributed to them or how Title IV aid is distributed to the institutions. Right. The flexible entry mode, and I have diagrams to try to illustrate. I imagine this one as sort of like an accordion where a student could start a few courses, and then once they finish a course, add another one within that same term. This is what Texas A&M Commerce is doing with their organizational leadership CBE program. So you've probably heard a lot about it, that they have a lot of advertising about this type of program.
Now, is that at the master's level?
It is a bachelor's degree.
It's at the bachelor's level?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's also online.
Okay.
And so students can complete a course, receive their grade for that course, and then the next day initiate another course within that term. As you can imagine, that a program like this would require a lot of administrative support to sort of monitor the progress of every student. And A&M Commerce, I encourage you to reach out to them and ask them questions about how they're facilitating this, because they've got a lot of good work going on with allowing students.
Do you know the cost of that degree and those courses?
It is part of the Affordable Baccalaureate program, and it's students pay less than $15,000. For these flexible terms, it's $750 a term because it's treated as a subscription.
Okay.
Okay. The next popular model is term-based, where a student would enroll in, let's say, 12 credit hours. And as you can see, some courses they may need to take the full time duration to complete, whereas others they may be able to accelerate their progress within those course requirements and complete early, but they're still locked into start and end dates, bookends essentially of the academic term. Campuses like ACC has this with some of their programs, their computer programming training. And then the third model that has the most popularity is the self-paced model. This is where you would enroll and continue just to progress on the courses or components or requirements. This is something like what Western Governors is doing, that a student just continues working towards either the micro units that build up to a macro unit, and that there's just a continuous progression in their degree. Okay, so what's happening in Texas? There's a lot of development and discussion about competency-based programs. We're seeing that institutions might be trying out converting some of their courses to encourage different student populations to be able to complete their degree, or to attract or incentivize students that may not have been enrolling or attending previously. There also are these different types of CBE programs. So a CBE program is going to look different on each campus as well, which makes it a little bit difficult for sort of tracking or comparing them because of the models they have set up. In Texas, you have the flexible entry and you have term-based models, and so they look very different on paper and in practice. This summer, with our CBM data reporting, there's been an update to one of the, and Julie provided this, Dr. Uckland provided this information last time, that we'll now have institutions reporting CBE on those reports, which will help increase our understanding of sort of the scale and the scope of what's happening, as well as for in my area being able to have further dialogue about what this looks like on the institutions, and how they're interacting with their students through these type of courses. In addition, in that memo, institutions were asked to contact me to let me know, so we can start keeping sort of a map or an understanding of what institutions are already offering these programs or planning to develop these programs. And so I expect as they as campuses start to fulfill their reporting requirements, my inbox will start to get flooded with institutions notifying me as well. Okay. So there are a few updates nationally. A few weeks ago was the national convening of the Competency-Based Education Network, where we had an opportunity to talk with some state system leaders regarding policies and programs that are happening in other states. Because other systems outside of Texas are set up a little bit differently, those conversations often resulted in, we're thinking about it, we're gaining information, we're getting traction. Like formal policies or legislation hasn't been installed yet, but that the dialogue is happening. I think the state that has a lot of activity right now is Indiana, with their Commission on Higher Education, that their funding model incorporates outcome and performance-based funding for a lot of their institutions, and competency-based education is explicitly discussed at the Indiana Commission of Higher Education, and it's part of a consideration. And so we'll keep an eye on what's happening there. They also, their community college system is more unified as well. So that might be sort of an instigating factor of why they're moving at a faster pace than other states are. Some more dialogue that was happening at the national level was continuing to link back with the semester credit hour due to the funding restrictions and requirements at the federal level, that this is really the big driver for what CBE is looking like at these institutions, that incentive is really important for their operations, and so and also for the students for creating a shared understanding of what these courses look like and mean in other contexts or setting or in other conversations they're having. So still linking to the semester credit hour or tying everything back to a course. There's also a lot of conversation about the reauthorization of the Higher Education Act as an opportunity to incorporate competency-based education explicitly. There aren't many policies at the federal level. There are experimental sites sort of exploring different distribution of funding for competency-based education, but the accreditors have the joint statement on how they're recognizing competency-based education and also still maintaining the importance of regular and substantive interaction, and then using that guidance when reviewing the programs or the institutions. Of the experimental sites, they started a few years ago with soliciting applications to participate, and the lists were quite robust. But with the delays with the experimental sites getting underway and some lack of guidance from the Department of Education, the list of institutions that are still participating has become much smaller. There are Mary Hardin Baylor and El Centro College are participating. The list was much larger of Texas institutions, but just those two right now. And the Department of Education has been taking open comments on what should be included in the assessment and evaluation of these experimental sites. So you're free to submit comments to the DOE regarding these sites. They're largely looking at financial aid distribution and waivers and exemptions. So for funding implications of CBE here in Texas, some of the conversations that we're having with our peers is looking at distinguishing what these programs are or are not, specifically regarding enrollment periods, instructional time, and progression towards degree. And then also how can we track or monitor this activity on campuses within our current systems, or are there programs that don't currently fit the model for how we're tracking what's happening in order to consider their needs. And then also the nuance and the type of enrollment period is going to influence funding. The flexible model is the most different from our current semester credit hour course-based design, and so that one's been getting a lot of attention, but it'd be helpful to continue to build our understanding of truly what the scope is at the colleges and universities across the state, so that the policy or practice is really driven on what will benefit the institutions and not highlighting specific cases that may not be consistent with what else is happening at other campuses.
Thank you for that presentation. Anyone have questions of Dr. Nellis about the presentation or CBE?
Oh, great presentation.
I think Jim had a question about WGU.
What's that?
Well, yeah, but I can do that offline.
Okay.
If we can talk offline, if you could shoot me an email with maybe your phone number or something. I could.
Yeah, I mean, I guess
I'm in and out so much. I have to use my iPhone when I travel. Even my iPad doesn't sometimes work,
okay.
And so I can't pull down lots of stuff. So if you could, yeah. Sure.
And I think related to competency-based education, so the Inspector General just submitted an audit report. It is not definitive action. It's just a report of their their investigation and their conversations with WGU, and they provided recommendations to the DOE. The DOE, after the comment period closes, can choose to act on any, all, or none of those recommendations from the Inspector General, and 2 of the 3 were largely linked to financial aid distribution, which is not necessarily specific to a competency-based education program. And one of the findings was looking at the role of faculty in the delivery mode of the programs. But like I said, these are just recommendations from the Inspector General that they don't, though they might have a perceived impact right now, they don't have an actual impact until the Department of Education takes action.
Well, we'd certainly want to look at those so we can avoid those pitfalls. That's all I was.
Yeah, it's definitely good to be aware of what that conversation looks like right now in the field.
Okay.
So I think the presence of that action causes us some concern, of course, and I think they cited the regular and substantive faculty and student interaction as a piece of that and what that means. And there's some debate about what that should mean in the long term.
Right. And how do you measure that?
So my question, you as an expert kind of in this space, when do you think we'll have some resolution to that? I wasn't aware that the CBE experimental sites had stalled out. We were early on wanting to do that, and then for various reasons we backed out. I didn't know that we didn't have those ongoing and some of the evaluation from that. So when do we expect to see some clarity on the financial aid front? Is that a next year, next 5 years sort of thing? And then the second question is, you suggest reporting and monitoring based on types of CBE programs, and you also said that earlier we're being asked to report those to you. So are we reporting those to you in the way you envision that in your statement, or is this something different you're asking about? So all those questions are geared towards, it's hard for us to make a recommendation about funding unless we know that the reporting is happening right, and then what the timing of all of that is, and whether we put that in the bucket of contact hour reimbursement or success points, or so there's a lot of moving pieces here. So could you kind of respond to all those thoughts?
Okay. Right now, a lot of conversation in some of these national groups is based on anecdotes or those that are sort of leading the charge publicly and putting their model or what work that they're doing out there. We know there's a lot that's happening even within our state that isn't gaining the same amount of publicity. And so we want to be mindful of that, the sparkly object, the shiny demonstrations or models, though that they're valid and that they're prevalent in the field, that we're considering that they're not the only models and that they're not the only ways that are happening. Regarding reporting and monitoring, because CBE wasn't part of historical sort of reporting here in Texas, the first step really is just getting a pulse and the scope and the scale of it, so that we can start then across the agency within our different divisions of thinking about what are the next sort of questions or points of information that we need to help with our processes internally. And then how does that affect sort of funding recommendations that might come out of these committees or policy recommendations as well? So I think first we need to get get beyond the anecdotes. Like, I know a lot of schools are doing these things, but we sort of need it on record so that we can then move forward with that. Regarding national resolution and clarity, as the Department of Education starts taking on which projects or charges that they would like to work on, that's when it'll happen. There's been a lot of talk about reauthorization of the Higher Education Act, and so that's the opportunity for these stakeholders at the national level to try to get CBE integrated into those considerations, and as well as the political landscape is changing regarding delivery modes and instructional design and technique, perhaps looking at how that could affect the aid distributions and aid requirements as well. But again, with understanding of, well, how are institutions building their model, because it might not be so different from a face-to-face course or other courses that are already being offered, that it might just be just how problem-based learning became very popular. It's not so far removed from lecture style. So it might still fit within the parameters and definitions that are guiding our policy right now. So it's hard to say how long it will take for policy change if we don't know how different this is.
Great, thank you. Anyone have any other questions for her? Okay, thanks for your time. Now we'll move on to charge 4, which is study and make recommendations on the efficacy of critical need fields as they relate to contact hour and success point funding. Mr. Wicklund, do you have any updates from the work group?
We had a good discussion today, and so we're going to be looking, well, we are looking, we don't have an actual recommendation, but we're still reviewing the idea of the reallocation of if we do away with the critical needs field and reallocating it to either like student success points, because it's just basically a reallocation, or do we realign the critical need fields into the higher demanding occupations? But it's a small effect, apparently. Like, was it 2%? Less than 2% that this is actually generating. So anyway, we're still evaluating.
Okay, great. So Dr. Eklund provided some information last time we met, so she'd asked us to review that. Do we have any further discussion on this charge at this point? Okay, hearing none, we're going to move on to the next charge. Charge 5 is to study and make recommendations on a new formula fund for dual credit programs based upon the number of semester credit hours offered in dual credit by Texas State Technical College, General Appropriations Act, and I won't read that, but it's there. As far as I know, there are no recommendations at this time. The work group met this morning. We don't really have anything coming out of that, but Mr. Reeser, did you want to share anything? Or
only that the general philosophy will be that this charge will follow the charge for the community colleges, and essentially with the intent that, if at all possible, make a recommendation for TSTC that mirrors the rest of the two-year sector.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Charge 2 is a study and make recommendations for the appropriate funding level for the refinement of TSTC's return value funding formula. So I understand there are no recommendations at this time, but Mr. Reeser, do you have any updates from the work?
I can say the same story as last time. We have distributed a large body of information about the formula itself, so that members can acclimate themselves, get familiar with it. And then, more importantly, staff, co-board staff has done an extraordinary job of preparing the first body of a straw man, if you will, for us to consider. And you'll find those in your material this time around. Now that we have that, we can begin to meet offline, and I suppose the process will be Roland and I will have to walk the rest of the committee members through all of the variables that are contained within that very large number of spreadsheets, so that everybody can get used to what it is it's actually measuring. And then we can begin to deliberate on, does it need refinement? And so we're at least a meeting away from a recommendation.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for that. Does anyone have further discussion or questions on that? Okay, great. We are at I believe the final agenda item, well, the next to the final. The next meeting we hope to have is on November 9th at 1 o'clock. Work groups should be finalizing our recommendations and bringing those with approval to the full committee, or at least begin doing that by that meeting. So make sure you have that on your schedule. Did you have something? Yeah, go ahead.
No.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry.
The final item on the agenda is adjournment. All right. If there's no further discussion, I have a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you for attending today.